First item on our agenda is approve the minutes of our last meeting.
Move to approve the minutes of our last meeting.
Okay. The minutes have been approved. All right.
Not a vote.
What's that? Do you have a comment?
I didn't hear the discussion or the vote. Sorry.
All in favor, all opposed.
Okay.
Any discussion?
Any discussion? Any comments? Okay. All in favor?
I've
Aye.
been doing this a long
I
time.
appreciate you. All right, so the meetings have been approved. All right, the meeting minutes. Shall we step into the agenda for this week? Which starts with staff reports, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, Peter, before we get into staff, if I may, I'd like
Yes.
to introduce Brian, he's got a few words he wants to.
Sorry. I'd like to introduce Brian. He has a few words he wants to share with the commission before we dive into the staff reports. Also, food's here too. So.
Any opposition to Brian speaking?
Not on the agenda, so if you don't want me here, I can go away.
Take the floor.
No, thank you, and thank you, Troy, for the introduction. So I'm Brian Latta. For those of you who have not met me, I think most of you have. I think I'm looking around the room. Douglas, I don't know if we've met, but it's nice to meet you, Douglas. This month is Public Service Appreciation Month. And as volunteers, all of you take time to come here and help the city of Dallas with our economic development planning and work, and that is commendable. And so I'm just here to say thank you and just let you know that you're appreciated. The council appreciates you. I have conversations with them all the time, and they ask about our boards and commissions. They ask about the work that's going on, and I'm able to report, and Charlie and Tyler and the work that they do with you. And so I'm just here to say thank you and just give you the gratitude that you all deserve for taking your time to be here and do this work. And it means a lot to me, and there's important things we're doing, and you have good staff that are helping you, and just again, share my gratitude. I don't have more to say than that. So, but I'm here to listen and enjoy the meeting today.
Right. Again, food is here. So if you want to just go ahead and help yourself while Tyler and I are talking, feel free to do that. You won't offend us. So again, the first item on the staff report section is the kind of the weekly or bi-monthly, I guess it is, update of items that are relevant to the economic development strategy. What we normally do with these is I don't go through every item. I allow you to, if you want to pick up on certain things and ask questions, Tyler and I are here to answer those. Tyler added some cool color tables to grab your attention in there that shows some of our output metrics, which is kind of a new item. Thing really, startling. A lot of it is just kind of work that's been continuing. We're nearing the end of the mill site TGM project. That'll be wrapped up by July, so that's closing down. We're into the second phase of the Lock Rail Node Master Plan. The sewer project's supposed to kick off this summer. We just had a meeting, and Peter can talk more about this if he chooses, to talk more about kind of the next phase with the mill site, especially as it relates to the North Fork of Ash Creek and kind of how we're going to prepare for that. Tyler's made some changes to the Downtown Urban Renewal Grant Program that's been blessed by the agency that hopefully will allow us to see some higher quality projects moving into the future. I think those are some of the main highlights. Any questions?
Just out of curiosity, just because of the way this is presented now with this very nice chart, do we have a ratio standard that we use for our investment?
We haven't set a metric that we've been trying to adhere to, if that's your question. And again, if there was that desire, I would imagine it would be set by the agency. If you as a body felt strongly that we should have one, you could recommend that to the agency to adopt, I suppose. But at least since I've been here, I'm not aware of any, policy that sort of sets a desired metric. And honestly, and Tyler may know this because he's closer to the action these days. I don't know if there's really kind of an industry standard that we should try to conform to. I think 9 to 1 is pretty good. It sounds good to me anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great question. I'm not aware of any metric that we're really striving for. I think the higher leverage we can get, the better, but we haven't set one.
When I was on an urban renewal district board, we put a 5 to 1 on ours, but I'm not proposing we do it. I'm just curious. 'Cause
Yeah.
sometimes, but that's helpful. Thanks.
It is something that we've always tracked. We probably haven't done as good enough of a job in the past of really sharing that information like we're doing now. So it may seem like it's new information and maybe to you it is, but it's not. It's something that we've always internally tracked.
I think the only reason I bring it up is it does give a public sense of, well, confidence that money goes to something that's generative, and so when people don't get money, they wonder, well, why would one get it versus another? And it gives you one tool in your tool belt. But I'm not in favor. I'm not trying to propose that we do it. It just, the way I saw this, it was like, oh, 9 to 1's pretty high. That's pretty good.
Yeah, it is, and I think that shows that the program is performing well and it's doing what it's intended to do. Yep.
How about the Gale Hotel and the retail development for the Hong Kong restaurant? Any insights as to what that might be bringing the city?
So you're asking both, those are two separate things, right? Yeah. I'll let Tyler talk about the Gale Hotel. I'll jump in a little bit on the Hong Kong restaurant. The new soon-to-be owners of that property have been in contact with us for a number of months now, and they're moving forward with a plan. We had a pre-application meeting with them recently. The plan is to purchase the property, demolish the existing building, and construct a new retail building that will house an AutoZone retail auto parts store. Not surprisingly, we're dealing with out of town, out of state folks, that are kind of corporate level hired to do this kind of thing. So we're not dealing with anybody local yet on this project. So, yeah.
Been vacant for a long time.
So Tyler wants to talk about the Gale Hotel.
Yeah, and the Gale Hotel property, I believe they're still in the process of purchasing the property. They may be close to their contract period ending, but their plan is to essentially redevelop the building, keep the retail bar use on the first floor, and redevelop those upper stories for apartment housing. And then they're also exploring the idea of taking the parking lot that's directly adjacent to the building, which is currently just an asphalt lot, and possibly doing new construction, some kind of addition to expand the housing opportunity there. And that owner is a company out of Salem that does multifamily housing development, and they've done primarily new construction, so this is their first foray into a redevelopment. But they're in the process of buying the building, and they've been in contact with our building department talking about the specific needs of that building, particularly on those upper stories. And they're well aware of our grant programs, and we plan on checking in with them closer to the end of the fiscal year to see where they're at in terms of their redevelopment process, because they haven't submitted anything formally in terms of a pre-application or any type of permitting. So we'll be checking in with them to make sure that they don't have any questions that we can answer for them before that.
And we don't have any parking.
Correct, not in the downtown, yeah. We're seeing in various stages of the pipeline from like this example where there's this discussion all the way to approval to construction. We're seeing quite a uptick in multifamily developments. And I think we're going to see a continuance of that trend going forward. And it's really in all different parts of the community. We're seeing it downtown. We're seeing it in the northwest part of the community, in the northeast part of the community. So it's kind of all over the board, I think, which is really good because, as not unlike the rest of the state, Dallas, always could use more housing inventory. And so this is, I think, a good thing to meet some of that demand.
Comment about the urban renewal grant system. The change took place based on initiation by the city, the agency. The Downtown Association chimed in with our thoughts on it. We felt parts of the changes were very good. For instance, money for planning and that sort of thing was something that's long been needed. But some of the restrictions that they put on the program to make it actually more, in our estimation, more difficult to manage and market, I think are a little bit of a setback. But it went through the system and we have to live with it. Downtown Association is not too excited about it.
Again, it's a fluid program, and we're always trying to experiment with it to make it perform better. If the current iteration fails to perform, we can always make changes again in the future.
Try to make it work, but
Yeah.
there's some difficulties.
Sure.
Change comes hard here.
Um, that's it on the kind of the update on the strategy. The next staff report deals with storage facilities. Commissioner Dalton brought this issue up. It has, and Tyler wrote the staff report, so I can turn it over to Tyler. But this is an item that was discussed at this body. I guess it's been now over 2 years ago, amazingly. And there was subsequent action taken by the Planning Commission and the City Council to try to address the concerns that were raised by the EDC. So I'll leave it at that, and I'll let, if Tyler wants to give any more information. Again, he did a good job of kind of giving you the background. Included with the staff report is an exhibit on the new language in the development code, as well as the current project that drew some concerns from Commissioner Dalton. And the bottom line is this particular project that's out there being constructed now was permitted before these changes were adopted.
They are officially adopted.
Correct. Yeah, they were adopted in March of last year. Right? Yeah.
Yes.
I think we did a good job of expressing what our concerns were about these kinds of things, where you've got storage units in the middle of the heart of your high quality industrial land. They don't have employees. They don't have a lot of equipment in it that's taxable, that sort of thing. And they occupy a lot of space. They spread out laterally. And in the case, I think that what went in there now is very demonstrative of the problem. They took prime industrial space, 5 acres of it, and put these units in there. And the other thing about units like that is that they don't support industry very much. They support housing, more housing, actually. And the community here is facing, as this group knows quite well, a crisis kind of that we don't have housing and commerce and industry in balance here. We're doing very well in residential development. We don't lose population like other places do. We just gain it. But we don't gain industry and commerce very well, and it hasn't kept up. So the tax base, which Brian cares about a lot, has been steadily eroded by industry moving out. And these units just support housing needs there. High occupancy housing, like apartments that need storage and that kind of. So there's a lot of reasons that they made these changes. And unfortunately, this outfit got its nose under the tent before we could catch that. But there won't be any more like that, I assume, with the same profile that there's some places, by the way, we said, they're kind of perfect for this kind of development. It's like when you need a buffer zone between residential and industrial, they make a pretty good buffer. In other places like down in that, by the city shops where it's really difficult area to build for commerce, they work pretty well in those isolated situations. They work quite well. And that one is thriving down there as near as I can tell. So we're not totally against them. It's just right place.
And- Yeah, I understand.
What would be taking this project, which is already complete, right? What's the argument in favor of it? In favor of it?
It's bare land, I guess, in terms of tax. This thing's for sale for over $6 million. I saw it on LoopNet for $6 million. I assume that would mean that the price, the property's worth something that would add to the tax base in our South Dallas Urban Renewal District considerably.
It's actually not in their renewal district. Yeah. But it'll help the general fund though.
If we do have a lot of high density housing, then a lot of storage is necessary to, you know, one bedroom apartment doesn't have, you know, storage. So there's a market for it.
Yeah.
I would probably add a little bit to that question, Commissioner Bauer, about you know, on this particular site, the total acreage of the site there was 10 acres. Is that a little bit more than 10? You know, little plus 10 acres of site. And so, you know, as Commissioner Dalton was saying, about 5 acres of that was dedicated to this industrial mini storage, you know, type units. The rest of the property was partitioned into, you know, half-acre to 1 acre lots, you know, slated for industrial type developments, you know, office spaces, some shops and stuff of that nature. And I would venture to guess, because, you know, these individual properties that aren't, you know, overly large, you know, may have need for storage, would actually probably utilize these storage units, you know, in addition to the residential uses that might go in there. And, you know, of those 19, I think there's 19 or more. I can't remember how many.
22 total.
There's 22 total lots.
Yeah.
You know, a significant number of those have already been sold or promised, as that's getting you know, finalized. And so it's like a little you know, mini industrial park, if you will, that I think will benefit from those storage units being there because of the size of the parcels of each of those little individual industrial type uses. So this one's, I think, almost unique in that it's not your traditional you know, mini storage units that are only going to be used by, you know, residential users for the most part, the large majority of that. You might get some, you know, benefit from those industrial users that are on these smaller parcels in this industrial park utilizing those storage units. So it's an interesting concept, a little bit different than, you know, what you've seen in the past, but it is built as those traditional ones have been, that, you know, take up a lot of space and, you know, aren't the most attractive thing and don't have a lot of employees and things of that nature. So I think the code as it's been amended is helpful. We'll achieve those directions that were given by this group. Correct. I think they have to be the multi-story.
Top of each other, so it's a better utilization of land.
Correct.
Rather than just.
Yeah, we have examples.
But not
We
laterally.
have examples of that here in Dallas. The storage depot, which is over near the city shops, that has multi-story, you know, structures, and so and there's examples of that, you know, all throughout the U.S. But yeah, I think we'll see, you know, more of that. So we're better utilizing the land, you know, retaining those industrial parcels which are prime for industrial type manufacturing development to bring jobs and equipment in. So yeah.
And I think, I mean, it's, as Brian mentioned too, the original conversation around that did involve the highest and best use of industrial land. I think that's where most of our conversation at that time was, because I think, you know, given the housing trends and multifamily, I think we knew that there was a market and continues to be a market for that as people move into the area. And particularly with multi-tenant, as Charlie mentioned, are coming, but it was that limited industrial land being used for it that caused some internal debate.
Yeah, because it's right in our sweet spot of where.
Yeah.
I get that.
But it's good to hear that there's a tie into some of the smaller industrial lots that are coming in. So maybe it'll end up helping to sell those.
This property, itself was subject to, a comprehensive plan amendment and zone change to make it into multifamily residential so that you would see, kind of a continuation of that little, neighborhood that's to the west of this. And the council fought back on that and denied that request. I think twice, if I'm not mistaken. And after the second time, the third try, the developer said, "Okay, I get it. I'm going to build industrial," and he's created a situation. Several of those industrial properties, the 22, we're starting to see a couple of those come in with building permits, and you're also seeing like a caretaker unit built with the industrial shops and stuff like that are there. So it's a hybrid model of what we're traditionally seeing. So it's different and unique, and I think if there's a market for it, that's great.
Okay, this is for maybe to discuss this, but the way that the rules operate for planning in planning department, the way that some of these multifamily dwelling unit applications come to the city council, they come with a due pass recommendation without a countervailing argument to keep it as industrial land. Something that's important to us, that we preserve our industrial land. But the council's been quite wise, I believe, in questioning that and turning those down and preserving industrial land. So I think that the city council really is working well in concert with us. But the way the plannings work, it's a checklist situation where DLCD has this checklist and it gets checked off, but it's not exactly what we ultimately want. There's more explanation to it.
I think there's our comprehensive plan addresses all 19 statewide planning goals, and there's goals for housing, and there's goals for industry, and there's goals for nature and open spaces and hazard zones and all that. And so the comprehensive plan addresses each of those things, and there's policies that fall under each of those supporting those different types of uses. And so when you're doing a comprehensive plan amendment, there's really kind of a balancing effect that a boarder or governing body has to make. And while the planning commission can lean heavily on certain policies that give a recommendation for one way, the council can look at the other policies and say, well, notwithstanding what the planning commission is saying, we agree that their arguments are good, but we feel that this is more important, so we're going to go against their recommendation. And that's what they did on this particular case twice. It is right.
Where we end up with a bad result.
Yeah, I was just adding that there's a balancing effect that all the boards and commissions have to do. In the planning commission, it's not so much a check the box. It's they had those same policies. They went with the residential policies where the council said, notwithstanding the residential policies are important, we don't feel they're as important as these policies, and so they reverse those decisions, those recommendations. Yeah.
Before we switch topic basis, I was going to recommend that we say a word or two just about Ash Creek update that you mentioned earlier. If that's okay with Charlie or Brian, do you want to just make a comment or two about, or I can, just about kind of looking at funding for that?
Sure, would that be under South Dallas?
You can talk about it with either hat on. It's really up to you. It fits in both categories. So
just a little housekeeping here. Microphones, you don't need to push to talk, but if you just bring them nice and close to you, we're streaming live on YouTube. All this will be recorded, but just make sure mics are picking us up. Thanks.
We have lunch.
Oh, we do. It's ready if we want to load up.
feel free to get up and get food. Yeah.
Anytime you can kind of jump up and get food. Do you want me to talk about the Ash Creek
Yeah, I think we
stuff?
should,
Sure.
for the rest of the.
So we had a meeting this week. Business Oregon was there, the city was there, the property owner was represented, and so there's been a lot of work that's gone on through. Was it a grant from Business Oregon that the property owner received to kind of study the Ash Creek corridor as it goes across the millsite property? And we're looking at taking that creek, which is currently diverted into some large culverts, kind of traverses the site. It's daylighted in a couple of spots. and then, makes its way out, further east, over by Cascade Home Supply, and then it continues on through the rest of the city, heading east. And the proposal is to daylight that creek, take it out of the culverts, and relocate it further to the south, which would enable the site to be better utilized for, as one parcel versus maybe two parcels, or at least two industrial parcels. The hillside south of where the relocated creek would be goes up on the hillside, not suited necessarily for industrial development, although it's currently industrially zoned. Likely going to see some zone changing that would take place there. The city, in concert with this other grant, applied for a transportation growth management grant to look at kind of master planning, is at least in a concept level, what could go on there, making some transportation connections that might make sense, through that site, to make it, a better piece of property for future development. And so a lot of pieces are all kind of taking place at once. But as we're getting near the end of the grant for the relocation of the creek in that study, there's been really good work that's gone on with that. Jacobs Engineering is the firm that's leading that effort. We're really at a point now where we have to decide how are we going to start funding aspects of that project before we can get to further design work that's going to be needed to know, how much it's actually going to cost and construction and some permitting that's going to have to take place. And so the consultant is working with, it's going to go back to their team and kind of draw up, what are those exact next steps that have to take place and how much do those cost? And they will get that information back to the property owner and to the city. And at the end of the day, we're going to have to figure out how to, fund some of those next steps, so that we can get to, a design ready project that can be constructed. We estimate it's going to be a very expensive project, tens of millions of dollars.
Yeah.
Not as expensive as building a new dam, but half as much at least. And so the good news is the city has been proactive at building up our reserves and our collection of stormwater revenue, in addition to our system development charges for stormwater, which is in a pretty healthy place. And so I think some of that initial investment that's going to have to take place, the city can probably take that on in concert working with the property owner, and to be able to get us moving the needle a little bit further on that project. Certainly as we progress towards final permitting and construction, there's going to have to be some stacking of outside resources. The city's not going to be able to take on that entire liability and debt without some either loans, low interest loans, grants, some forgiveness that might take place. I'm looking at things like the Special Public Works Fund at the state, other programs that are available through DEQ, and some stuff at the federal level. So we're going to be looking at those opportunities as well over the next year or so, to really put together a package that can fund that project. There's a lot of elements that go into that project. You're relocating two bridges, a bridge on Main Street and a bridge on Uglo. The good news is all that can be done outside of water because you're relocating the water, right? So you're not having to do a lot of in-water work. You kind of build the whole new creek, in a dry setting, and then you just divert it at the points, and voila, it's done. So, so that's nice. There's not there's still environmental permits that have to take place, of course, but to a lesser degree, because you're not tampering so much with the biology in the creek while you're doing that work. So there's just different permits and reviews that have to take place. But it's a good project. There's probably also some transportation funding avenues that we need to explore because we are, redoing those bridges and roadways. And so we're going to be very, very active in finding what sources of revenue we can pull together to make that happen. Did I cover most everything there? All right.
I would just want to add the other major benefit is flood control, and that most of this industrial corridor is in the FEMA floodplain. And so from a development perspective, it isn't just a nice to have, it's a critical for everything.
Yeah, and thank you for bringing that up, Peter. I think with so a third project that the city undertook was kind of studying the entire North Fork of the Ash Creek flood area, and that work's been substantially completed, and to the degree where we could actually submit to FEMA a request for revisions to the floodplain boundaries. The mill site itself was not subject to the 1980s FEMA flood study. They opted out of that, and so we didn't have data. Right? If you look at our maps, you have floodplain over here to the left, and you have floodplain over here to the right, and then the mill site itself was just this blank spot. And you knew there was floodplain there, but you just didn't know what it looked like. And so this work that they've been doing under this grant with Peter and the property owner has been to kind of study that area, opening up that creek, making sure there's enough capacity so that you do control flooding, on the site itself. The areas, especially further to the east, we know that the Ash Creek at one point had been diverted, I think back in the early 1980s. And so the current alignment of Ash Creek is not the historical alignment, not the floodplain alignment that's shown on the flood insurance maps. And so there are a lot of property owners that are currently paying flood insurance in the flood program that don't have to. And so the city has already submitted the letter map revision for those areas. And there are some other areas that are now going to be a little bit more encumbered with floodplain that maybe weren't before because of where the creek is now. And so there's going to be some trade-off there, but a lot of residential areas in particular are going to be taken out of the floodplain and they will no longer have to pay that flood insurance. So that's a really good thing. And that work's already taken place.
Good on that. This is a lot of good news. Sorry I was late.
So that concludes the two formal staff reports we had on the agenda. So technically you're at 2C on the agenda.
Are there any questions?
Well, unrelated to the reports or just I'm kind of curious about the farmer's market and what's going on. It started back up again, right? Can you give us a quick little snippet on that?
Yes. So the farmers market started on May 3rd, and they just recently had one this past Saturday on the 17th. Both weekends have been very successful. The vendor growth since last year's close to double. And so that's been really exciting for us. And the vendor growth's also been in vendors that are providing either plant starts, produce, or any type of other plant adjacent type of products, which has been very successful as well. And so we're just in the process of continuing the market. We recently received some funds from the Salem Health Foundation to help supplement the SNAP program. So now because of that funding, we'll be able to provide one-to-one match for folks who are using SNAP at the market, which will increase their buying power, which we're very excited about. And we're working on still theming as many of the days as possible to also provide some additional incentives for folks to come. The one hiccup that we've run into is the federal government's opted to terminate the AmeriCorps Rare program, which has funded which in part with our match, Michaela's position, who's been essentially running the market for the past 2 years. And so we've hit some hiccups in terms of trying to make sure that we can do a lot of that handoff and planning that we were anticipating doing this year, having to do it 2 to 3 months earlier. But Michaela has great relationships with both the Downtown Association and the Visitor Center, so those conversations are happening now, and that works going very smoothly, as smoothly as it can be. Now we're still waiting for the AmeriCorps program to tell us the result of a federal lawsuit and an injunction that may allow for Michaela to complete her contracted term. But if that's unable to happen, Michaela is still going to be working on handing those things off to both the visitor center and the downtown association. And there's also some additional options that the University of Oregon is looking into to try to extend the final 2 months of the program, utilizing other funding from other nonprofits. And there may be some additional grant funding that we have on our end through the Downtown Association and the Farmers Market Association grant that was received earlier this year that may be able to supplement her time and make sure that she still has the time to be able to complete the full transition process. But that's where we're at with the farmers market right now.
Thank you.
I have a quick question. May I?
Yes.
Do you have any insight, or does anyone have any insight on the new business going in at Fred Tebb's old property? Did it add, is it an industrial? Did it add employees, et cetera? Is there, what's the potential upside if it's possible to share that
So
information?
there is a new owner and a new company that's going to be operating there. It is a wood products adjacent kind of a business. They're actually based out of New York, but they have previously had an operation in Albany and somewhere else in the Willamette Valley, but they're trying to consolidate to one location. They weren't able to expand in Albany, so they're moving that operation to Dallas. They're in the process right now of kind of working with their own architect and our building and fire folks to make sure that everything's safe. The previous occupant of that location wasn't, so we're trying to make sure it gets done right this time. So they should be up and operational relatively soon, I would think, as long as they get all those issues resolved. And they haven't told us to announce anything yet. So, but it is and I don't know the full employment numbers either. It's not going to be a lot, but it'll probably be in the tens to 20s, I would guess, maybe. But there'll be something going on there, I'm confident they'll be doing some investment in the property as well. So it seems like it's all a good thing.
Nice.
I attended the 791 briefing in here and then the little tour. And I'm very impressed throughout this whole process with the consultant that we hired, Brian Benjamin. He's among the best consultants I've ever worked with, and really has put together an outstanding program for that possible building on the Bank of America property. I just can't imagine anybody handling it any better than he has. I don't know what Charlie thinks.
No, I appreciate that, Brian, and we're really happy with our consultant as well. We'll kind of know where we stand by the end of next week when the RFQ period closes. And again, this was a request for qualifications from developers who had the interest and ability to take on a project like this. And so we haven't received anything formal yet. The deadline is the end of next week, so we'll see where we're at. And the plan is, assuming we get a suitable number of responses, is to then transition into a more of an RFP process that's targeted at those that responded to the RFQ. So we'll see where we're at. We'll know more in a couple weeks.
Firms do you anticipate sending the RFP to?
Oh, we sent the RFQ to dozens, and we also posted it. Right. I mean, the plan right now is the only ones that are going to receive the RFP are the ones that responded to the RFQ. Now, we may have to pivot if we don't get a suitable response to the RFQ.
But almost everybody presumably sent in qualifications.
Yeah, I think if we get, a suitable number of qualified responses to the RFQ, then all of those will receive the RFP.
When is the deadline date?
It's next Thursday or Friday.
Thursday?
Yeah, I think it's the 29th or the 30th.
29th.
29th, next Thursday, week from today.
Okay.
Charlie, can you remind me how many developers we had, in the room and online during the open house?
We're looking at Ben. Was it 4 or 5 or
We
Tyler?
have 4 online and 4 in person.
So we had 8.
I mean, not to say that a developer, interested developer that didn't show up wouldn't still submit an RFQ, they could do that. But, you're probably dealing with, 8 or fewer that will submit an RFQ, and then we'll work with those.
Yeah. And our consultant's been kind of going back out and reminding some of what he felt were some of the better qualified firms that may not have responded to the site visit and tour, that, they still have an opportunity to submit something. So we'll see.
He seems
Yeah.
very well connected to potential.
Well, that's why we chose him. That was one of the big reasons why we
He
chose him.
knows them by first name.
Yeah.
And been to
Yeah.
their house for dinner,
Yeah.
Just one kind of comment. I actually ran into somebody who attended that and brought it up to me. They knew I was here, but it caused me to think about, and I don't know if this was part of your process, but with those developers and with the construction groups that are attached to those developers, the question is always going to be about money. And the availability of money to fund a project. So I wonder if there is a pathway to make sure that any of the banks that are doing local lending are more aware of the project as well at the same time, or if that's part of your due diligence on it. Because, there's local money, local banks, or a lot of these same developers all go through the same funnel to get their money. And sometimes it helps to bring in the potential funding group to familiarize them with the project based on the city's work as opposed to the developer's work.
That's a great point, Jim. And I think our thought process was is we would do that task during the RFP process. Yeah.
I know the challenge right now at the moment for these guys is, can I line up the money?
Definitely.
So
yeah. Yeah. Thank you for that.
Okay, should we move on to the last item? Have you talked about that Rite Aid closure?
What you want to do? You're the
Yeah,
chair.
Let's do it
Okay.
quickly, and then we can move on to.
I'll hand it over
the
to
others.
Tyler unless somebody else wanted to lead that discussion.
member comments. We're going to have member comments or.
Okay, we can do member comments before Rite Aid.
It's on this agenda before.
It is, and we're at 12:51 right now instead of 12:45. Just trying to move on.
Okay, I'll
Yeah,
talk very quickly.
member comments.
Those of you who didn't notice, we had an election ballot measure that went on the ballot, went down 55-45 for a new police station. And I think that reflects on us in terms of economic development and the faith and trust that our citizens have in our government and our judgment and all that. I brought before you some months ago a list of the questions that were asked by the National Community Survey, the NCS survey. And I think that this offers a clue as to a start point to assess why this didn't pass. There's lots of issues regarding demographics. We have an older demographic. We have a lot of poverty, low income, et cetera, and then some other things. And I think it's worthy to go back even further and look at the nature of how people view their government here. And this survey was pretty thorough in terms of that. And as you might recall, the findings were when we were compared to about 350 to 400 other cities that asked the same question, we ended up in the very important questions of a well-planned commercial growth and all that sort of thing, in a very low status, around 10 to 15% of the lowest in the nation. And so I think that's a start point for the government to analyze why the citizens didn't step up for it. It was very well campaigned. I didn't see a single sign against it. We had no organized opposition, and the city council put it on the ballot on a 9-0 vote. So it was really well campaigned, and we still didn't succeed. And we can do one of two things: just throw up our hands and say we haven't passed a measure like that in 25 years. So we have zero general obligation bond debt, which is very unusual for a city our size to have no investment in the future like that. And I think we can either just throw up our hands and say, well, we just can't get anything passed here, or we could begin to work on building a better bond with our citizens, between the government and citizens. And I would vote for the latter. Thanks.
I just add one related thing, I'll be
Yes,
quick.
absolutely.
famous last words. Just speaking of the elections, I think it might be helpful for this commission to maybe in the next 6 months or so invite Chemeketa Community College to come in and talk about what their asset here is in the community and maybe get some feel for how, given the economic development strategy, what kinds of resources they can be bringing to the table in the future now that they've, got their funding. Because it seems like that's, at least what I've heard on the street, it's an underutilized resource in Dallas and in the area. And if there's some things that we as a commission can do to kind of encourage them and learn a little bit more about what their menu is of offerings, might be inspirational at least and informational for us.
Great idea, I think.
Good idea. Mhm.
I would encourage staff to make note of that so that you make that invitation. And if I can just add two bits to that,
Yes.
to both points, to Commissioner Dalton's point, I think that, yeah, we don't know why it didn't pass. I think there's a lot of reasons. And I look at, what Commissioner Anderson just said, in Chemeketa, they went out 6 months ago and were unsuccessful, right? And then they went back out 6 months later and were successful. And there's, reasons for that. They identified some of those reasons and were able to, rebrand, remarket, and go back out for the same bond. There was no change, and it passed this time. So, and there's lots of examples of that in the past. I'm pleased that Dallas, the voters turned out in higher percentages than anywhere else in Polk County for the election this time, which is a testament to our engagement with our citizens. And 250 voters changed their minds, and the police station bond passes. It was a close election. 55-45. Is within striking distance of getting something approved. I do know that the council is invested in the concept, the project, making sure that the police are supported. They will circle back up, have conversations, figure out what the next steps are. I think that they are committed to making sure the community is engaged. I know the council is certainly engaged in their economic development activities, and they want to see that grow as well. Economic development takes time, just like successful campaigns do, and I think the council will be committed to moving forward with some project for the community to consider in the near future.
It was,
Thanks, Brian.
I was involved in the Salem bond for the police facility on the citizen group that encouraged it, and we had to do it twice in Salem. So I encourage us to continue that here as well.
State this time, there were 3 communities in the state that tried for a police station, and all 3 failed. I mean, we're not alone.
Yeah.
Dallas isn't unique in having struggles. There is distrust in government, and I agree with Commissioner Dalton's statement. Just in general, whether it's local, state, federal, county, the number one fear of Americans is corrupt government, and that's something that we just have to counteract. And I think being transparent, doing good work, having advisory boards and commissions, councils, be transparent in their work and communicating to the public. I would venture to guess that a large population of citizens, when they open up their ballot, the first time they hear about a project or recognize a project is being trying to be communicated to them is when they see it on their ballot. And so I think there's an opportunity to take that marketing of, oh, the city wanted to pass a police station. Well, I didn't know anything about it, so maybe I voted no, or maybe I voted yes.
Yeah.
But now we have an opportunity to say, yes, we just asked you, didn't pass. That's okay. We're okay with that. We heard from you. Now let's figure out how we do get something passed that you are willing to support.
Right. Any other comments? Okay. Let's move on then to Rite Aid closure.
Chair. So as you may or may not be aware, Rite Aid is currently undergoing its second Chapter 11 bankruptcy. And so what it looks like the path forward for this is going to be the shuttering of Rite Aid as a brand and as a company. And so initially when the list came out of closures for Rite Aid stores, initially Dallas wasn't listed there. And it seemed like that had changed. So Ben and I had visited Rite Aid, spoke with the manager, got some information and confirmation that the store will be closing at the beginning of June. From there, Charlie and I did some research, and we were able to connect with the realty firm that will be representing the corporate-owned stores for Rite Aid. And they confirmed that the plan is for Rite Aid to sell off the corporately owned stores that they currently do own, which Dallas is one of those. The Dallas store is unique in that it is owned by Rite Aid, the corporation, and not Rite Aid leasing from a property management company or some other entity that may own the building. Excuse me. And so where we're at in the process is we've made that connection with the realty firm and the point person for the Rite Aid for all of the Rite Aids across the country. And we've expressed our willingness to want to work with them as the sale develops, but they're not at the point where making a sale or beginning to market the property is something that they're able to do right now due to the bankruptcy. So we'll be reaching out to them in the next couple of months to follow up and make sure that we're staying on top of assisting them however we can in terms of helping them find a suitable buyer for the building or a leasee for whoever the next owner would be.
Great. Just don't want to have an empty building there for a long time.
And it's a 22,000 square foot building with about 2 acres of land. So on the one hand, it's a great opportunity for Dallas to have that retail opportunity available. On the other hand, I just kind of want to temper and manage expectations with the scenario that we've been given. We need to be prepared that it's likely that it could sit there for a while because they're managing it at the corporate level. And we don't know how motivated they are to really sell it in the marketplace, nor what the market demand really is for a product of that size.
Is there potential outreach that could be done? Because now there isn't a lot servicing the Dallas community as far as there's Safeway, of course, but as far as kind of a classic drugstore, and it may be a niche market, but is there potential outreach about a vacancy, not necessarily of that building, but a vacancy from a market perspective in the city of Dallas, and that people may have to head to McMinnville or Salem because that Rite Aid is now no longer. I mean, I'm just wondering if
I think that potential's there. Again, if we continue to develop a strong relationship with the owner's broker, I think that'll really help us get there. And I'm optimistic, I guess, that we can do that, but we'll see.
yeah, it may not be for that exact property. It could just be another location within the city of.
Right, we'd have to identify another location. Yeah.
I mean, just.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, it's really interesting that we've had, in the last, year and a half, 2 of our 4 pharmacies in town closed down. And so I know one of the pharmacists at one of those pharmacies that are remaining, and they are slammed. And so I think that there is a demand, at least a workplace pressure demand to, either staff up those existing pharmacies more and find out how they can expand their capacity there, or have an opportunity for, someone that, runs a pharmacy to, come in.
A little bit familiar with high school pharmacy over in Independence, and it's a thriving business. It's a real good business.
Hey, lots of good information. I think we should adjourn if there's no other comments and move on to the South Salem Urban Renewal District Advisory Committee. So if you've like to call this meeting to order, and
For approval of the minutes?
very good. There's a motion. Do we have a
Second.
second? A second? Is there any discussion about the minutes? Any changes or recommendations? No? Okay. Let's have a vote then on approving the minutes. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? Okay, motion carried. Moving on to the staff report. Charlie, I think.
Yeah,
Yeah.
thanks. I just wanted to take the opportunity to share with you the, excuse me, the Urban Renewal Fund budget that has been approved by the Budget Committee and will go on to the council for adoption here very soon. This fund is proving to be very healthy, which we're happy about. It's outperforming really the other urban renewal district in terms of its ability to collect taxes. And there's no reason to, I don't think any reason to assume that that trend is not going to continue. So we're very pleased with its performance, which allows us really for the first time to have enough funding available to maybe start doing some projects. Of note, we've budgeted, and again, I should back up a little bit. For the first time ever, we've structured this as a biennial budget. So what's been approved and will hopefully be adopted is a 2-year budget from 25 to 27. If you look at attachment A in your packet, you can see the budget that's been approved or was proposed. And again, of note is we've budgeted 250,000 over the 2-year period under professional services with the intent that we would use some or all of those funds for projects related to next steps at the mill site. And again, we talked about that a little bit earlier. What some of those next steps are around Ash Creek. We've also talked about, and at this committee about maybe using some or all those funds for studies around use of the rail. So again, right at this point right now, we have not identified exact projects for that line item. I would anticipate we could have some further discussion, certainly beginning now as we have time, but moving on into the future. I would love to hear the committee's input and feedback on some recommendations about where you think the best use of that funding might be.
I quickly, last meeting, there's a comment that I suggested to funding a professional study to better understand the issue of rail. Because there's so many rumors floating around, it costs this much. We don't have hard data to make good recommendations. Again, we don't make decisions, we make recommendations. But we've been all over the map in terms of whether it's a good thing. It's right now it's being advertised as rail is being advertised as a possibility to prospective clients. Of course, they call us up and turns out, well, it's just sort of a fantasy. There really isn't rail. And I just don't see personally how we're going to have a big enough industry, enough robust industry down there occupying a big space and putting out rail car after rail car full of some kind of goods that goes to Los Angeles and New York. I'm just not seeing it. I think our more modest look at this, the well-designed combination of residential on the hill, some appropriate commercial down there that has a little bit of sort of industrial quality to it, maybe hardware stores, that kind of thing. And then let's call it modest industry that isn't like a big snorting giant industry that makes noise and pollution and all that. I don't think anybody really wants that. So we were looking at some kind of a balanced thing, but if you have rail, if you focus on rail, that really demands almost a big industry on that site. And I'm not sure we're envisioning that. So, but we don't know. So I made a proposal here that is a movement to try to corral this and using the funds that Charlie described. And here goes. In view of the lack of information and data upon which the South Dallas Urban Renewal Budget Committee can make well-informed recommendations regarding rail service and into and within the district, I move that the agency staff assemble a draft request for qualifications for a professional review of the entire question of rail service to the district to ultimately determine its feasibility, practicality, market for the service, and its cost. The draft of this RFQ would be brought to the next ERDAC, South Dallas ERDAC, meeting for discussion and its recommendation regarding its implementation. Because this action is of direct benefit to the South Dallas ERDAC, the cost of this review should be borne by our budget and not the property owner. That's my motion. I think the word is lacking a second, the motion
That's
dies.
your motion.
Right.
Is there a second? And then we'll discuss it, okay?
Oh.
Can we get a second on it?
The wording is the motion dies for the lack of a second.
Unless there's
clarify?
a second, you don't discuss it. So you have to second it. You can still vote yes or no after you
Yes,
second it.
right. You can't, but somebody needs to second it, and then that's
I'd like to discuss it, so I'll second.
very good. We have a motion and a second. Time for discussion.
I don't recall if we had the railroad representative in to speak to the EDC. It's been probably, we know Michael Ewan, Yuen, he's fed Tyler some leads, et cetera, and he's the Genesee, Wyoming rep, not the Union Pacific rep. But it may make sense to invite him in with some key talking points about rail cost, cost to develop the line, budgets, number of cars, those types of things. If feasible, since we are getting a lot of what Mr. Dalton talked about, we get little piecemeal bits of this. That doesn't discount or say we wouldn't necessarily do what Mr. Dalton's proposed, but it's kind of like bringing Chemeketa here. Just a
Probably,
thought.
and it's far less expensive to start that way. And then based on what we hear,
I would agree. I mean, I think having been involved with some of these where we put the information together for a client or a prospect, knowing that there is rail service, and then even some of the information we get out of the rail company is, oh yes, we can do that. But then folks that know the lay of the land have questions about what's going to be involved with different state agencies that have to be addressed, different crossings that have to be addressed. We've never had a really good feel for what, when they say rail is available is one thing, what it's going to cost somebody and who will generally have to bear that cost is a whole other. So I think the more information we can get is a positive.
So far, what we've been doing is just piecing that together. We get a little piece of it here, a little piece of there, some theories, some prejudices about it. And it all boils down to, can we advertise that we have a viable rail system, and what does that entail? Who pays for it, for instance? And how much does it cost? I think you're going to need at least 3 automated crossings. And what do they cost these days? $600,000-$700,000 a shot. Greg was telling me he might have to spend $1 million out there on the crossing where Orr's Corner goes across the track. He was not prepared to pay that from the county. So, I mean, there's a lot of moving parts here, and we talk about it a little bit, but we haven't gotten definitive expertise to advise us of what's the real set of facts and data about this. And so I was proposing that we hire somebody who can get us that information and give us an objective opinion about whether this is going to be viable or not. I'm of the opinion that I don't see any viability for it, for the way that the use of that property is unfolding.
yes,
Just looking for a point of clarification on this, because the Urban Renewal Agency would be who engages the consultant, right? All we're doing is
Pay for it.
What's that?
The South Dallas Urban Renewal District budget would pay for that. Charlie informs me the money is available in the budget that could be directed to that.
So my understanding of what the motion is, and correct me if I'm wrong, Commissioner Dalton, would be that the motion, if it was approved, would direct staff to prepare an RFQ. The committee here could review that RFQ and forward that on to the agency to make the decision on whether or not to do the RFQ, to actually publish it out.
Thank you.
There's a
That's,
number of
Yes,
steps.
yes.
that,
So Commissioner
Very
Dalton's point is just to direct staff to prepare an RFQ for your review that would then be recommended if you accepted that to the agency. The agency would make a decision on whether or not to push that RFQ out.
thank you. That's very helpful to find our kind of place in this exactly.
So I'm
And
not a commissioner, but an alternate approach to your direction here, Commissioner Dalton, would be to say, hey, if we think rail is worth exploring, and if you as a commission think that's the case, the first step might be to recommend to the agency to say, we think this is worth an exploration, and we would recommend that a direction is given to staff to prepare an RFQ for our review. So that you're already moving that, instead of preparing the RFQ, you're telling the agency, we think this should be explored, and we think you should tell staff to prepare an RFQ that we can review and then send up to you. So it's a slight twist on what you're recommending, because you're recommending to prepare the RFQ and then send it up, instead of knowing ahead of time that the agency is willing to pursue an RFQ, then you're having staff do the work. That's just an alternate approach.
thank you. And that's kind of precisely why I'm asking for the clarification. It seems like we could do it a little more smoothly and I would say, I like this approach. I know we'd have to take down your recommendation, but I'm more in favor of that approach than us basically trying to prescriptively
Yeah.
do this.
Mhm.
It's our job to make recommendations, so
Just a different
I
twist
think
on the
it's-
recommendation.
what I propose is in keeping with our mission, but if there's a better way to do it, I'm all ears. And that would be a amendment, suggest an amendment to what I said.
I have a comment on the wording proposal. Quite broad what you're looking for. The broader we make it, the more it's going to cost. There's a marketing study in there to see if it's, there's the condition of the rail, the cost estimates, all these things come together. We don't really have a good handle on, how much would that cost at this point? I think we can achieve what you want for less money by narrowing the scope of the thing. Your question is it really feasible to, market this piece of property with rail access? Does that even make any sense? And, can we get to that point without doing a huge study? Maybe.
The reason I added so many things in there is I was trying to address all the questions that have come up. Because we've discussed every one of those points, cost, who pays, feasibility, et cetera, and it was trying to be sure that there wasn't some loose end that somebody would grab and pull on, and if you know what I mean.
I know what you mean. And you don't want to miss one of those, we could come up with, it would cost so much money to do this, but there's no market for it. That makes no sense. You could come up with,
That makes sense to be as economical about this as possible, but I'm not sure that would satisfy everybody's need for information. And again, you guys it's the staff recommendation that would come to us about what an RFQ, request for qualifications, would look like. And then we talk about it. It gives us a chance to cut back on that, for instance, or they would recommend that it be more tidy, as you're suggesting. So that would, if they bring that to us with a recommendation that cut it down or this is good, then we can talk about it. We have something to talk about. This is more right now just theoretical.
This is just to make the property more appealing, right, to a potential buyer. Could we not, rather than put money towards the rail or any aspect of the property, could we not offer that money in a grant for building for an industry? Because if you buy a house and it's got a gravel road on it, eventually you're gonna put a nicer road on it. If we offer a grant that gives a big industry the ability to build something, especially something that's pushing product, then they'll have incentive to rebuild that railroad anyways to push their product out. They're making money. They have that plan. It just seems like it would be maybe a little bit better than trying to push for rebuilding a railroad that they may or may not want to use anyways, especially if we have that option there. I don't know if that's something we could do.
Any other comments?
Yeah,
Yes.
if I may, I just did want to add that on the staff level, we had been exploring what the scope of some type of study with this on this scale would look like. Obviously, it's just very unique in nature, and we haven't been able to find something that's the right fit to kind of base our a potential RFQ or even a potential draft project scope off of. But I just wanted to make the body aware that it's something that we're looking at. It's just we haven't quite been able to find the right frame of reference to begin drafting something that will fit this project site just because of how unique it is in nature.
Charlie.
So I also, excuse me, I want to go back to Peter's recommendation. I think I believe there's some value that would educate this group to have Michael come in. I know he did meet with us a year or two ago, and I can't remember who else was in that room, but it wasn't one of these official meetings, but many of the stakeholders in this room, I think, were part of that. But regardless of that, I think there's some merit in having that done. It's not going to cost us anything to do that, obviously. And it may better inform us to take whatever next steps we want to take. Also, just want to point out that with the limited resources we have, we need to decide where we want to put our money first. What's the highest priority? And we still have the Ash Creek issue to resolve as well. So I don't know that we have the resources to take on everything all at once. So part of the guidance could be, or discussion is, what's the highest priority?
I'm in on that. To me, the Ash Creek is the highest priority, certainly. But the two combined are deterrents to a really good operation down there. You've got the spider web of tracks everywhere down there. And if you're developing this, I think the way correct me if I'm wrong, but we're looking at it as a commercial, industrial, and residential, some sort of package of that stuff on those acres. And with a whole spider web obviously we have to correct the Ash Creek problem because that thing runs right through the middle of the thing, just hacks it up into unusable pieces. So we need to solve that. Plus it floods. Who wants to buy land in a floodplain? And so we need to solve that. I agree that's number one priority by far. Then the next problem up is the spider web of rail lines through there. And if we're not going to use the rail lines, the sooner we can get those things out of there, the more marketable it becomes for Eric and his crowd to sell that property.
So,
Hey, Peter, then I'll
okay, spider web, there's some tracks that run parallel to, I don't know what street it is, right? It's not owned by us. There are some tracks that come onto the mill property, which we are pursuing just to quote unquote, tidy things up. But we're not touching anything with that main line. Will not that main line come under the transportation plan, and will not that main line that runs parallel to all of this industrial property in this Ash Creek corridor come up during the TGM project, because those projects will have rail crossing implications.
You're referring to the TSP update?
Yeah, TSP update and also the TGM project, because changing the flow of roads will change railroad crossings and expenditures, et cetera.
So yes, the answer to your question is yes. Those will be part of those conversations. They have been part of the conversations with TGM, and they will be part of the conversations with the TSP. So I'm gonna try to do a magic trick and make everyone happy. I have a sticker here that says I'm not a magician, but I think it's a good idea to get someone from the rail in to refresh everyone's opinion. I also think it's a good idea to explore the rail and what the opportunities are or not with that site. And I also think it's important that you have assurances that the agency is going to accept your recommendation. So I would offer, as a staff, put it out there for someone to grab as an amendment to Commissioner Dalton's motion to say that we're going to recommend a motion to ask the agency for authority to study and explore rail in the South Dallas urban renewal area by requesting a request for qualifications for that study. And we can hash out the details of what that study looks like later.
I think I could.
Okay,
So there's been a motion, so you have to ask for a
we
second.
have a motion. And we have,
That's an amendment. to
That's an
my motion,
amendment.
Correct?
Yeah.
That you'd vote on that first and then.
Yes, only if there's a second. So let's have a
we'll
second.
vote on amendment first.
If there's a second.
If there's a second.
There's
I'll second that.
all right.
There.
He's seconding.
Very good.
So is there
Okay.
any more discussion on that
Yeah,
amendment?
is there any more discussion on just the amendment?
Yes.
No. Okay. Then let's take a vote on the amendment. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any abstentions? Any opposed? Okay, motion's carried on the amendment.
Now you're voting on the motion, which is the motion that I amended. Well,
As amended.
Jim amended. Yeah.
It's original.
My,
Yeah.
my original motion as.
Okay.
It's been amended.
Okay,
So any more discussion on that?
yes. Okay. All in favor, say aye.
I,
Opposed? Abstentions? Okay, motion's carried. That was a good discussion.
May I just
Very good.
suggest if we're going to bring the railroad in, it might not be a bad idea to connect ODOT rail as well.
Yeah.
I mean, we have a little bit of sway given that this Governor's Strategic Reserve Fund was used to do the work. I'm part of this site, and I think we need to lay into that and get the other state resources, maybe even Business Oregon's recruitment, somebody from there just to, so we're getting a full feel of not just the railroad, but that ODOT rail and Business Oregon can hear that same story.
They were part of the TSP discussion, and it was very helpful to have ODOT rail there. I have a question, one more question to ask about the document. Would this be the same budget document that you would be giving to the Urban Renewal Agency?
I mean, the only difference is the approved column would be filled in with the numbers because this is the version that was taken to the budget committee as proposed, but there weren't any changes, so it'll look the same. Right, Brian?
And in just one other point of clarification, mostly for us to think about. So in some ways, it's slightly prescriptive in that it lists the criteria, which we've all agreed to over time, A through I, as to how we direct our time and our resources related to the urban renewal area. And although, this is back to Commissioner Dalton's point, but I mean, we can put rail in there and it certainly sits inside of one of those, but Ash Creek is a primary objective.
Yes.
So it does, in the way this is stated, an Ash Creek project really has a primary place in here. In some respects, what we may be doing is asking to clarify whether or not rail should have its own, it might be J, or it might be more clarified in C, D, E, whatever place inside here. Just because this seems to be and this has been true in the transportation, the TSP discussion. I mean, this is our guiding priorities. So just kind of wanting to make sure we see that.
So if I can just comment on that and add to that, I think that's great, great point you're making. So the A through I, those are points that are made in the South Dallas Urban Renewal Plan, right? That was adopted. And, I think both the Ash Creek project and the rail project fit under F. And these are not in a ranked priority. A is not more important than B and C and D and so on. But, improve the infrastructure, transportation, including rail, water, wastewater, and storm drainage, including, Ash Creek. So, those projects are captured within A through I already. And I don't think you need to specifically call out, any one particular project. The narrative summary below is actually written by me, and I pulled right out of the plan and then some of the things that we're planning on doing with the funding. So, the most important part of this page is the numbers themselves, right? Making sure that those are in the right place and at the right amounts. But no, I think you're spot on. The projects that we're doing should be tied back to those primary goals, and they are under F.
Thank you for that clarification. Yeah. Yes.
Has this area had any level 1 environmental study done? How would be to go in and see what potential environmental hazard due to the previous use of the property? Have been done. Yes.
And a 2.
And a 2.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Yeah.
One more thing. There is, on the Ash Creek study, they identified an old bridge that's, I believe it's adjacent to Main Street near the bus.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
That I drove by, it looks pretty bad shape.
Mm-hmm.
It's my experience as a bridge engineer, retired. I look at that thing and I go, if that thing caves in, it's gonna block Ash Creek. If it caves in a flood, we're gonna have water everywhere.
Yeah.
Maybe that's one of the things that Commissioner Belton would like to get out of there. I know, I think there'd be some benefit taking that part out, at least. It's not gonna be ever reused. Because it's in such poor shape. It does potentially present a hazard.
That's the little rail spur, the little rail bridge next to where the river goes into the, yeah.
Then over.
Partially block that culvert.
Some of the rail is owned by the rail company, the other is privately owned by the.
That's squarely on your property, right, Peter? Yeah.
Leon? Mhm.
So let's play that scenario out a little bit. If that did collapse and was blocking the drainage way, hopefully not during high water, but it'll get removed. It'll be nice, proactively, and we can work with the property owner. Peter's here, and as contacts with them, and they can be proactive in removing that. Yeah, but it's right. Yeah, I mean, it could be any variety of factors that can cause something to collapse. So, yeah, I mean, it's good to be mindful of those things and proactive.
One of them. Associated with the relocation of Ash Creek.
Mhm.
What cost items that's on there.
Yeah.
So it will decrease slightly the overall cost.
Sure.
Any more discussion on that, Charlie?
Before we entirely close this discussion today, and we're running out of time, and I'm not advocating for the idea, but I just wanted to honor committee member Hazelton's point that he made earlier that I think got lost in the shuffle a little bit, and I didn't know if there needed to be some more discussion on that or not.
Anyone have any comments?
Incentives first.
Tree in here. That seems like that's kind of what we need, right? It's jobs to support the housing that we have in here. And I mean, as far as the Fed's going right now, it seems like it would be a good opportunity to try to latch on to one of these manufacturing businesses that inevitably will be coming back to America anyways, or pushing out of other states. I just think it's a good a good opportunity if we can try to, make it easier for one of these companies to come in. I mean, we have a Centec here already. They're big manufacturing. They've got a lot of manufacturing overseas. I'm sure they're, looking to move in to a different area as well. There's other, I mean, we have a lot of machinist industry in Oregon already. A lot of them have outsourced their manufacturing and they're going to be looking to bring it back in. And I think it's something that we can jump in on, as far as the rail goes. There are industry that would use it, but unless we're going to get, a Boeing in here or an auto manufacturer or something like that, I just don't think it makes a lot of sense because there's a lot of companies that are doing small parts, you know what I mean? So that's kind of where my head's at with it.
Yes, Brian?
Sure, if I can just add to the conversation on that topic. Under your the areas, the primary goals that the district was created, B is assist job creating development with appropriate incentives and partnerships, right? And then again, H, which is similar, says leverage private sector capital through creative partnerships. And so, like you have with your downtown urban renewal agency, and that district, they have grant programs that help with the revitalization of buildings and helping those buildings to make sure they have good tenants and stuff like that. I would offer not today a long conversation, but if there's direction by the committee that you want to say, hey, let's start to explore what other cities or agencies are doing to help incentivize industry to come in on industrial lands, and we can start discussing what types of things make sense. Are there land readiness programs that we can develop and have some of this funding of the agency go to in the future, and those sorts of products. And so I think there's certainly room for that conversation and development of those programs over time, and just starts with direction from you guys.
Readiness aspect, because I think that certainty in the process of having a site ready to go into the timeline that a business can follow. I mean, Oregon is notorious, and I think we all admit it, that we're not a strong incentive state. The enterprise zone that Dallas is lucky to have is the primary state incentive for industrial development, and that's not state money. That's local funding ultimately. So I think processes, the hand holding, having the site ready to go, all that. But if you have a little bit of extra, to put into something for a sweetener, it's always great. But all the projects that we've been working on, I think other states would be shocked at how little local and state resources go into some of these 20, 50, $150 million projects that we've been working on in this region in the last few years. And spoiler alert, none state money.
I think that the incentives would be a great idea. I really do. And I think that that's kind of what Peter was talking about when we were talking about the Rite Aid closing. Is there something that can be done early on without naming the Rite Aid property, but to provide some sort of incentives for new businesses to come in? And the same with our industrial site. So for the industrial site, we have this fund growing. I don't know that, and just backing up, I don't know what we have for commercial, but um,
Just to add on to the conversation, so you all are aware, we are exploring what a potential grant or incentive program would look like. We've talked with other communities that have urban renewal districts that have industrial land and have industrial incentive programs. So we're formulating on what that might look like for Dallas. Obviously, it's not at a point where we're ready to present it to the body. But we anticipate hopefully later this year, we could have some kind of draft or outline of what a potential incentive program could look like. Again, other communities, theirs are a lot larger in scale. Their grants are up to $200,000, $250,000. So obviously ours would need to be much smaller than that. But we're trying to find what would be the right fit for where the district is currently and what types of industry we might be wanting to attract. Those conversations are happening already,
Right.
With some other communities at the staff level.
Hey, well, we'll look forward to that report. Absolutely. All right. Is there any other discussion? Any more member comments?
I just want to follow up on, from our minutes, our discussion at the last meeting about having an ex officio person from the county commissioners that we'd like to at least know whether that's a possibility or at some point in the future. You'd see it in the last part of the other business of the last meeting.
I'm in favor of that if we can do that, but I don't know where that goes from here, whether.
I think the way we did it is we asked to be guided by staff on this. So it doesn't have to be today. I just want to remind everyone it's.
That's a good reminder. I don't know what work's been done on that, but we can circle back with staff and just find out what needs to happen in order for that to happen.
The county provides another viewpoint that we really miss.
If we do bring the railroad in for a discussion, it may be wise to invite somebody from the county commission to that one particular meeting. Just because it has such a. Yeah, it's bigger than the city of Dallas. Not that the city of Dallas is.
Well, I learned that even sitting in on the transportation plan meeting. I mean, this is in our area, there's a lot of interrelational stuff here that it just is what it.
So has there been a decision to invite someone from the railroad first before we do anything?
Yes,
far as-
so that wasn't captured in the motion, but
Okay.
it was just a consensus. We're going to bring the railroad.
Okay,
So that'll happen.
okay, very good. All right, is there anything else? If not,
I just had to
Good.
ask a question, I guess, before we conclude. As far as Rite Aid goes, it's a large commercial space, and I don't know if Dallas, I guess, as a city body can do anything with it, but just a thought, it would be a large parking lot for a food truck lot, and the internal space would be perfectly set up for kind of an indoor farmers market year round. And I don't know if that's something that we could utilize, but that would give, each person would have to, set up their own entity, be a business, but essentially you could set up 20, 30 micro businesses within that. And then each one of them obviously would be taxed, and then having that food truck outside. But anyways, kind of a pop-up
Yeah.
strip mall type deal. But anyway,
okay,
just a question.
something to consider. So, okay, let's adjourn. We'll get back to that.
Yeah, perfect.
Adjourn. We are adjourned.
Property.